introduce Bryony. Thanks. Bryony, we had a session a few weeks ago where we were talking sort of quite broadly about fundraising and about starting to build sort of fundraising strategies for the 15, because obviously everyone has very different profiles of what they're doing as a group. And so this is one of a series of sessions that we're going to be doing. So we don't expect all the answers to everything today, but we thought that the main aim of this session is just for us to have a bit more sort of background to what the Arts Council is trying to do with your funding programme, so that we understand a bit more how that informs the way that you make decisions. So if I hand over to you, and what we'll do is perhaps if you can give us some information, Tina Costello from Heart of England is going to join us shortly, and then perhaps we'll have a Q&A session with you both at the end of the first sort of session, so that we can pick up on some common themes, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I will try and not use kind of acronyms or things that don't make sense, but if there is anything, if you just type in the chat and then Laura can kind of interrupt me, you know, we're a small group, I'm happy to be interrupted, and obviously anyone watching this on a recording will be able to kind of email me or ask Tam or Laura any questions. So yeah, hopefully this is kind of the start of a sort of lifting the lid on what the Arts Council does and what our funding programmes are. But don't feel that you need to kind of make copious notes, or, you know, everything that I'm going to say is on our website. And obviously we're kind of here to support you in sort of interpreting that information. So sort of, yeah, hopefully you've got a cuppa, sit back and watch a short presentation, and then we'll be able to take questions. So let me see if I can master the technology. Okay, so can you see this as a slideshow?
Yeah, that's working. Yes. Oh, we've got your presenter notes as well. I don't know if that's.
So how do I do that? Swap presenter view?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, perfect. That's working.
Okay, cool. I'm going to be looking at a second screen because that's what my notes are. So if it looks a bit strange, just so I can try and keep to time. So yeah, just for the purpose of everyone, I'm Bryony Windsor, and I'm a relationship manager for Arts Council England. That sometimes gets shortened to ACE, so people might talk about it like that. And I specialise in visual arts, but I work closely with Ruth and Tam on the Transforming Leadership programme, and have a kind of wider remit around the City of Culture. But that's my background, is in visual arts, specifically craft. I'm a white woman in my mid-30s with shoulder-length brown hair, and I'm wearing a stripy shirt dress because it's a hot day, and I have glasses. So this presentation is going to sort of hopefully tell you a bit about the Arts Council itself, our strategy, which is called Let's Create, our funding programmes, which we have two main ones that are really relevant to this group, called Project Grants and Developing Your Creative Practice, which is a bit of a mouthful. So we tend to shorten that to DYCP. Everything in the slides will obviously be available for you because it's recorded, so that's great. You'll be able to hopefully go back to it. The one thing I will say is that because it's a recording as of the 9th of September, everything is correct as of today, but obviously sometimes our funding programmes are updated, and so it's always important to go back to the website and just check that you've got the most up-to-date guidance, and if things change, very happy to come back and talk to you about them. So to kick it off, you know, what is the Arts Council? We are an arts and cultural development agency. We are the arts and cultural development agency in England, in fact. And we do a number of things. So we champion, develop and invest in artistic and cultural experiences, really to enrich people's lives. We support a range of work across arts, museums and libraries. And we invest money in cultural experiences that are available to everyone. We have open access funding programmes, as I've said, that I'm going to talk to you about, that are rolling, and some have different rounds, so I'll go into those. But we also have national portfolio organisations that you might hear people talk of And you might actually be working with some of them, such as Beat Freaks, in the Transforming Leadership programme. And they often get shortened to the acronym NPO, and that stands for National Portfolio Organisation. What that really means is that they're funded on a 3 or 4 year basis, so they don't apply to project grants, for example. And then we occasionally have strategic funding programmes as well, and Transforming Leadership is an example of that in action. So we awarded £7,140,989 to be specific, in 18 projects to deliver a range of leadership activities to support people at different stages of their careers. We also have capital funding, which is around buildings, and sometimes we run other funding, such as a programme called Elevate, which supports diverse-led organisations. So there are multiple ways that people engage with the Arts Council, I guess. So I just wanted to give you that overview, but there are really 2 key things in line with what Laura's been saying about your own practice that are probably the most relevant. So I'll come on to those shortly. So last year we published our strategy called Let's Create, and that takes us from 2020 to 2030. And this is really our vision, I guess, and a roadmap of how we're going to get there, that everyone in England, you know, will be given a chance to have their creativity really valued and given the chance to flourish, somewhere where everyone has access to high quality cultural experiences, regardless of where they live. It was the result of nearly 2 years evidence gathering, working with the public, museums, libraries, arts organisations, stakeholders, our staff. You know, we really kind of went far and wide to support this strategy and the development of it. And you can find out more information on our website about how we went about that. And it really boils down to kind of these 3 outcomes. So creative people is the idea that everybody can develop and express creativity throughout their lives. Cultural communities focuses on villages, towns and cities being able to thrive through a collaborative approach to culture. And that would all culminate in a creative and cultural country, get it right, which is that England's cultural sector is innovative, collaborative and international. So I think it's important just to kind of give you that sort of overview on where our thinking is, and actually the documents that are out there that are hopefully transparent for you to work out, you know, what we're about, why we make decisions and how we go about them. So alongside our strategy, we published 4 investment principles. And these are really, again, they're relevant to our funding principles, but you don't need to be an expert in these. It's just so that you kind of understand, you know, really that sort of broad brushstroke of where we're going from. And then you can kind of do a deep dive if you want into our website around any of these particular principles or anything else that you're interested in. So as a quick overview, ambition and quality is really about, you know, ambitious, things being ambitious, people being committed to improving the quality of their work, including the Arts Council. Inclusivity and relevance is that England's diversity is fully reflected in the organisations and the individuals that we support and the culture that they produce. Dynamism is really about cultural organisations and individual practitioners being able to thrive over the next decade with all the challenges that we're facing. Obviously, pre-pandemic, we wrote this, and post-pandemic, it feels even more relevant, really. And then environmental responsibility. Really, this is about leading the way for cultural organisations to approach the climate emergency. So that is a little bit of an overview on that. And we sort of feel that by working with these investment principles, you can build a kind of a robust either organisation or individual practice. And that will kind of help you really become more resilient in the future and ultimately deliver the 3 outcomes that I mentioned before. So before I sort of get into the nitty gritty of the 2 funding programmes, I just wanted to tell you about the access support that we have available for anyone, individuals, disabled-led organisations who may experience barriers when applying for our funding. This can include pre-application support, so that could be the cost of an access support worker to be a scribe in a meeting with us, a personal assistant to help in those situations, or for somebody to complete the online application form. We can also discuss BSL applications, and we provide guidance in alternative formats such as large print, easy read, and BSL, including and Braille. So if there's anything that you feel that isn't provided through our website, please contact us, and we will do our utmost to provide something in a format that works best for you. And the best way to do that, the details are on the next slide, but it's to contact our customer services in the initial phase, and obviously Ruth or Laura or Tam will be able to help you do that, and we can discuss any access needs that you might have. So because of this, we also have a dedicated page on our website, which is artscouncil.org.uk/access. And that's where you can find easy read versions and some of the support that's already available, such as audio guidance, information sheets and easy reads. I always use the easy reads myself anyway. They're much easier to read. We also have released 8 audio versions of our most popular guidance. And again, sometimes it's just nice to listen to the guidance rather than reading it. So these are for everybody, but we can also do BSL guidance on demand. So that's the whirlwind whistle stop tour. And this is the bit that is most relevant to you, I think, as the next 2 funding programs. So one is called Project Grants and one is called Developing Your Creative Practice. I'm going to run through Project Grants first, just so that it's all succinct and in one place for you. And then I'm going to run through Developing Your Creative Practice. But please do stop me. I have a tendency to talk fast. And, I really want this to kind of work for you guys. So do say if there's any questions. I think I can see the chat. Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Chrissy. Excellent question. And I will come to that. Post your questions in the chat as you think of them. They're great. So Project Grants is for people who want to make experiences that reach people. So it has to have a public, and the clue is in the name, in that it needs to be a project. So that will make more sense when we look at the difference between Developing Your Creative Practice and Project Grants. So it's really an open access fund, which means that it's open all the time, 365 days a year, and you can apply as and when it suits you, rather than something that has a published deadline, which is quite common in funding programs. So it's always open. It's for new ideas, talent, and new approaches really to the arts. So we're one of the few funders that supports individuals, particularly for these ranges of values of support. We're really proud of that, and we know how much of a lifeline Project Grants is really to keep the sector going, have those conversations, those skills, those practices thriving. So arts organisations, collaborating groups, individuals, libraries, art centres can apply. It's quite a wide reach. And really the activity must benefit people in England because the money comes from the National Lottery. So it's lottery players' money and it needs to benefit people in England. But that can be a longer term benefit if you're working on something that is a kind of research and development, for example, for a project. The project is still likely to reach people in future, but maybe not now. Or there are things that you're going to make some work, put on an exhibition, and this amount of people are going to come. There's loads of information about all of the kind of ins and outs in our guidance, and the guidance, as I say, is available in different formats. So I'm not going to sort of do a comprehensive review of all of the guidance, but if there are any questions, let me know. And all applications must be done online using our online portal, which is called Grantium. And it's worth just kind of getting to know Grantium. That might be something that there's a session on or some guidance on that we can share. So what can you apply for? Most projects fall into one of these categories. So literature, dance, music, theatre, visual arts, or combined arts. And by combined arts, we mean either a combination of art forms, or it might be something around creative media, like do it using technology, or it may be festivals and kind of galas, events, things like that often fall under combined arts, like a carnival. If your project doesn't feel like it falls within one of these art forms, we can have a chat about that. You know, don't worry, you could contact our customer services team and just have a chat about your project. Sometimes things are outside of what we can fund, so we're just going to have a look at that in the next slide after this one. But the sorts of things that you can fund, so doing research for a new project, that might be talking to people, finding out places, themes, you know, really getting into the research of a project that you want to do. And that might mean that your public might be in the future, the way that you engage with people might be further down the line. So you might be finding partners to be able to do that with, and you'd be showing us, you know, what will happen with that work in the future. You can make new work. So this could be writing a play, a book, putting on an exhibition, choreographing something, making new music. You might put on events, gigs, plays, workshops, or you might run workshops. So this might be you teaching others your skills, or it might be you going on a workshop to learn new skills. And then when we speak about touring work, that is things that go around maybe the region or a particular area, or even nationally, internationally sometimes. So for example, a play or a dance piece sometimes is performed in multiple venues. Again, you know, don't worry about what all of this means in the finer detail, just sort of start getting your ideas going and thinking, well, where would I fit in this if I had a project idea? So what you can't apply for, as we've said, work that won't ever reach people in England, things that have already happened. So we can't pay for things that you've already started or paid out for. School or university courses. So these are things that are really for the Department for Education. So we can pay for courses, you know, if you wanted to go and learn a new skill, it just can't be an accredited, you know, university or school course such as an A-level or a degree. Business running costs, what we mean by that is if you have a project that is going to run for 6 months, you could legitimately say, I need a studio for 6 months. But if you have a studio and you want us to just pay for that on a rolling lease, and you want that for 12 months, but your project is only 6 months, you know, we don't pay for overheads and running costs of your business, but we would pay for things related to a project. And then I know from your biogs that cinema and fashion, the fact that we don't fund that might set a few alarm bells ringing. And we do have the British Film Institute or the Fashion Council who do fund these things. And we will come on and talk about film in a little while. And also, you know, there are exceptions. So if you consider yourself a visual artist working in fashion, for example, then we could discuss that. So it's, as a rule of thumb, we don't fund cinema or fashion in their sort of commercial context, but always happy to chat about those things. They're always a point for discussion. So just to quickly give you an overview of the application form, just so that you kind of understand where the questions will be and what you'd be looking at answering. So we have these 4 sections: quality, public engagement, finance and management. And we are refreshing our guidance and our application forms towards the end of the year. So this is very relevant for now, but it's just worth bearing that in mind if you're thinking about applying to us later in the year. It'll, you know, don't rush to get something in, take your time, but just be aware that we might be coming back to you and talking to you about a slightly different format, although we're always still going to be interested in these 4 things. So quality is really about you and your project. You know, what do you want to do? What's your experience to date? How are you going to develop your practice? Public engagement is all about reaching people. And that might be a very small number of people in a very deep way, or it might be a mass audience. There isn't a kind of a one size fits all. You tell us, you know, what your project is, who it's going to reach. Finance is really the budget. So are you expecting any income from other funders? I think Laura mentioned fundraising strategies, you know, and that might mean sort of multiple pots of money coming in from different people. And in a budget, then you would weave that all together and sort of say, right, you know, if you're looking for £10,000, where's that coming from? and then your expenditure, where is the money that you're applying to the Arts Council going to? And management is really about making it happen. So, how are you going to manage the project? What is the project timeline? And really how much you ask for from the Arts Council depends on how many questions we ask you. So you can imagine if someone's asking for that upper end, £80,000, we're going to ask more questions than if they're asking for £10,000. So we do try and kind of make it relevant to the size and scale of what you're applying for. So that is project grants in a nutshell. So I'm just going to quickly check the... Oh, now I can't see the chat. I could, and now I can't.
No, we're okay. There's no more questions coming. Just Chrissy's question about whether we can grant both.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that, Chrissy. And I won't forget. So developing your creative practice. This is one of my favourite funds, and I think, this is probably very relevant to everybody watching this. So this is a highly competitive fund, which means that we get way more applications than we can support. But for the ones we do support, it's highly competitive, it's highly transformative. So there are some great case studies on our website about people who have got Developing Your Creative Practice grant and what it's done for them. And it's open for anyone to apply to who's an individual practitioner or a small group. And it's really about you telling us how you want to develop your practice, how you will go about doing it. So it's really open to you dictating the parameters of what development looks like for you. So the sort of nuts and bolts of it are grants are from £2,000 to £10,000, and we have 4 rounds a year. So unlike project grants, this does open and close at specific dates, and 1 round has just closed. So we'll be announcing the next round opening on our website soon. We've not announced it yet, so I don't have the date for you. But there's usually a window, and actually when one closes, the other one opens. So don't worry if you're not ready for a particular round, another one will open. So this is for individuals and small collaborating groups. So it's really focused in on freelancers, individuals, people working together rather than organisations or big corporates. This is really focused on personal creative development. So we sort of say, be selfish. This is about you. Why this opportunity and why now is the real crux of the fund. And again, there's published guidance on this in different formats, and it's really worth just reading that, having a look at what the questions are and thinking about, what would an opportunity be for you and why would you need to take that right now? So it needs to be timely.
Bryony, there's a question coming from Josh, which is, can you apply for different creative practices? Is there an expectation that you continue to build on previous Developing Your Creative Practices?
Oh, that's a really good question. So if you have a recognised practice, for example, you're a theatre maker and you want to develop a different creative practice, that's fine. If you have multiple strands, so I know we've got people on who kind of do graphic design as well as, lots of other things, and, you might run a company but also be into theatre dance. You can have a mixed practice, that might be a combined arts practice. There's not really an expectation that you would continue to build on previous Developing Your Creative Practices, because most people are only funded once or twice through this fund. So it's not something that you continually apply to build your practice. It is about applying at that specific time where you really need to make that step change or take that opportunity. But it definitely is based on developing a practice that already either exists or that you want to pivot from. So whatever your baseline is that you're trying to develop, we would want to see that you had, some skills in that area or the potential to build those skills, and why that would be relevant. So I hope that answers your question, Josh, but do say if not. So the things that you can apply for, again, this is all focused on you. So just think about you in this sense, ignore a wider audience or what you would do after it. So think about, you want to research and develop for something, but not necessarily a project. You want to experiment with collaborators to test your practice, try new things, build new networks, professional development. You might want to travel. You might need to travel internationally to explore your practice. You might want to make your practice more sustainable, or respond to COVID, such as it's forced everyone into new ways of working. That might be trying to enhance your digital skills or working in a socially distanced way. So lots of things apply. It's really open for you to tell us what the opportunity is, how it will develop your practice, and how you'll go about it. Oh, slide error. So briefly, what we can't fund is the continuation of existing work where there's no clear development. So this isn't just sort of doing more of the same, this is a development opportunity. And that's really important that you kind of can articulate and understand what that is. Again, we can't fund university or college fees, but we can fund workshops, residencies. You would just tell us why that residency, why that workshop, why is that pivotal to your career? Again, touching on film and cinema as an art form, we can't fund, the creation of a new, 2-hour feature-length drama, but we can fund film as a medium for a visual artist, a poet, a dancer to get their work out to more people, or as a creative output in its own right. This really isn't, as I say, for things to develop then a project. You'd be much better coming to project grants for that. And unfortunately, we can't cover the loss of earnings due to COVID. So briefly, there's an application form with 3 written questions. Now, I'm not going to read these out because they are available on the slides and also on the website. And there's also an audio version. But if anyone would like me to, please just say, just in the interest of time. So as I've said, it's really tell us about yourself, what the opportunity is, and why is it important? And it really does boil down to those 3 questions. The character count is quite tight. You'll see it's 1,500 characters. So you do have to sort of be quite succinct, which can be a real challenge. So it's worth batting this around with people, having somebody check it over before you send it in. And then you can also send an example of your work, like a link or a file. So that might be a link to your website or Instagram page or anything like that. And a supporting document that's written by someone else, which can be really helpful to just get a different opinion, and for somebody to be saying, might be a mentor, might be someone that you're working with, why this opportunity is really timely for you, supporting the fact that this is the right activity for you to take and now. A tick box which doesn't actually inform our decision making, but we just then know for our reporting where people are focusing, and an expenditure budget. So you don't need any income for this, any match funding. This is all about, we will give you a grant and you will spend it out. So in that sense, you don't have to fundraise to be able to apply to us, and an activity plan with the timeline. So because this has been a whistle-stop tour, I think it's very important to say this is an introduction rather than, the last time hopefully you'll see me, or certainly that you'll engage with the Arts Council. So on our website, there are dedicated pages for access, as we've discussed, project grants and developing your creative practice. We have a customer services who are unfortunately only available at the moment by email or live chat due to COVID. Our phone lines are down. And I've put my email up there because I think it's really important that you have a face to the Arts Council. There is every chance that I would also, if you were a theatre maker, for example, link you up with other colleagues. But there is only a couple of us, so relationship managers, there's a small number, so our time is challenging. So please do kind of use all the other support available, but know that our door is open if you get stuck or you need something. And that is me. So I will stop sharing and just answer the questions as well, because
I think there was a question in the chat from Tam about what legacy the Arts Council would like to have from their funding. don't know if that was specifically for the developing your creative practice or across all the programs.
Brilliant. So I'm just going to answer Chrissy's question, because that's really, I get asked this all the time. So you probably wouldn't apply to both, because you would either be at this moment in time really going, that one's for me, I need to develop my practice, and then you might go on to develop a project, or you may be ready to go with a project. The rules on eligibility are that you can apply, you apply for one, and you have to wait until you get a decision from us. So a decision takes around 12 to 16 weeks, depending on whether you're applying to project grants or developing your creative practice, and for what level of funding. But once you have a decision from us, you can apply to the other programme. We would just want to see that you had the capacity to run both projects, or a DYCP and a project grant. But people do that. But I think if you're a first-time applicant, it's important to just really think about which is the right fund for you first. Sometimes when an applicant sits on the fence and an application sort of could be either, it's not very strong on either guidance, if you see what I'm saying. So, you know, if it's a project grant, really look at that public focus and really go, you know, really tell us what that opportunity is. And if it's all about you, then don't worry about trying to find that public. Tell us about, you know, what the opportunity is for you. So that would be my advice on that. And answering Tam's question about the legacy we would like to have for our funding. So I guess, you know, feeding back into those earlier slides, really around creative people, cultural communities, and a creative and cultural country. Fundamentally, you know, we want all of these pots of funding to build into a rich sector. The requirement on you as an applicant is actually, you know, hopefully fairly reasonable, in that you can download from our website an activity report form, and that really tells you what we're going to ask you to fill in for the last bit of the funding, to draw down that last payment. And it tends to be, you know, tell us what went right, tell us what went wrong, tell us how many people you engaged with. So this isn't about necessarily setting out a project and everything going really swimmingly. This is about development, and particularly in developing your creative practice. We actually want to know what you've learned from it. So we're not going to kind of come back and say, you know, you said you'd hold a workshop on a Thursday and you held it on a Tuesday. Why is that? You know, we're much more interested in the bigger picture. So you can download that and have a look at it. But I think really the legacy for us is around those investment principles. It's around those outcomes, and making sure that, you know, there's a more equitable distribution of our funding in future. Yes, so that's me. If there's no other questions, I will be quiet for a moment and let Laura take over. But I'm sticking around, so yeah, put questions in the chat if you need to.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Bryony. I'm going to hand over in a second to Tina Costello, who's joined us from the Heart of England Community Fund. Apologies, sorry, I'm just struggling with my own technology. But what we'd like to do is Tina's going to tell us a bit more about their funding programs, and then perhaps we can pick up some of the sort of more the shared questions that may be relevant across both sort of programs. So without further ado, I shall introduce Tina. And Tina, just to sort of mention, there's 15 in the group, but not everyone's here in the session, because obviously people are managing their involvement around work commitments and things. So we do record the sessions, but they're only for internal use, so they're not used outside of the 15. So I hope that's okay.
I don't want everyone to be disappointed, but I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I've been literally on the go for the last 48 hours, so do forgive me, guys. You're just going to have to listen to me. So I've had a look through all of your brilliant artistic skills. I'm going to tell you briefly about the foundation, but I want to be honest, we're very different to Arts Council. We are a very small regional funder, so we generally don't support individuals, only at the moment through our City of Culture programs. But let me tell you a bit about us. So we are the largest independent regional grant maker across the West Midlands and Warwickshire. So we are a registered charity. A bit about me, I've been the chief exec for 7 years. Before that, I ran Awards for All for the West Midlands. So I do have a lot of experience in grant making and what makes a good application and how to be successful when you are writing a bid. So just briefly, what is a community foundation? There's 46 of us in the country, and we all cover a very specific area. So all of the money that we raise stays in the West Midlands and Warwickshire, and it doesn't leave this region. So if you're not based or you wanted to do work outside of this area, there are another 45 community foundations if you are interested. So our vision is to create happier, healthier lives for the West Midlands and Warwickshire. Primarily my role is to actually bring in income. So when I left the lottery, and on April the 1st, they'd give me the £5-6 million budget and say, go off and spend it. I had a little bit of a shock when I came to the Community Foundation, when I realised I actually have to raise the money, which then goes out to support our fellow charities and community organisations across this region. So the huge difference between us and lottery programmes is that we have to bring in our own income. So my job is literally constantly trying to find out where I can get money from. So back in the day when I joined, most of the money we distributed was from central and local government. So we didn't really bother with corporates. We didn't look outside of that. And then governments change and things change, and suddenly that money really did dry up. So us as a charity had to think about where we were going to get this money from. So we work with a range of corporates. We deliver funding for Coventry Building Society. We deliver money for Wesleyan Assurance. We deliver money for a lot of corporates in this region. Now, nationally, we are affiliated to UKCF, and we are talking, we don't know whether that we could have a potential arts programme, and then that would be, I'll be having a different conversation with you today. So at the minute, the majority of our work, we do fund arts organisations, but it generally has more of a community benefit. So it could be a painting group that actually supports people that have had a stroke, or it could be an organisation that supports people with mental health through positive arts and crafts. So we're not in a position where we can fund individuals for individual piece of work, except through the City of Culture. In a couple of weeks' time, we will be launching a new fund with the City of Culture, which has a focus on the LGBTQI community. This excites me. We've never done anything like this before, anything so specific. So do look out for our website. That will be coming out in the next few weeks. And we're also running a general community fund for people that want to celebrate the City of Culture across Coventry. I'd love to sit here and tell you that we've got lots of money, but we don't. We have a finite amount of money. All of the decision making on our applications goes to an external panel, but they are all people that are based in this region, people that can help us to make sure that the money that we distribute is going to the right places. So for us, what makes a good application? We're not, as I've said, a big funder. It's who's going to benefit. Why is the project needed? We always look for a little bit of consultation. So we've had historically people apply to us for projects that actually they don't know. I'll give you a great example. It was a couple of years ago. An organisation wanted to do stuff for teenagers throughout Stratford. So they were planning to have giant Scrabble in the street, which is great. So I said, oh, have you consulted with young people on what they want? And they hadn't. So if you are looking to put in a programme to us, always evidence what the need is, who needs it and who's going to benefit. The other thing we look at is impact. What is the benefit of this funding going to do? It doesn't have to be huge. It could be that 10 people have participated in an activity and they feel better about themselves. That's all we're looking for in an application. So who's it going to benefit? Why do we need it? And what is the impact going to be on that fund? So at the moment on our website, if you do go on our website, you'll see loads of links. You've got Wesleyan Coventry Building Society, Made by Sport, Birmingham City Council, Solihull, and for the community sector, sometimes it's a bit of a minefield of, I know that a lot of organisations spend 3 days out of a working week looking for funds. And that's such a shame. So what we'll be launching in the autumn is something called a single front door. You fill out your application and you tell us what you need, and we will identify a funder that we work with that we think will support your project. We're always looking at ways of improving, because the community and voluntary sector are our customers. Without these brilliant people out in our communities, we wouldn't exist. So from the autumn, if you do look to apply to the foundation, you'll fill out one form and we will worry about who hopefully is going to fund it. So we'll be launching that in the autumn. It's very exciting for us. We've had loads of user testing. Everybody thinks it's brilliant. So do look out for that. Okay. So in terms of arts specific programs at the moment, it is really the City of Culture programs that you'd be looking for support from us, unless you're planning to do a project that does have some wider community benefit, and then obviously that's a different conversation with us. Festivals, events, they all bring people together. We love supporting things like that. But there's such, reading all your bios today, I mean, just got a skill set that makes me feel embarrassed. From writers, producers, creators, you all sound absolutely brilliant. But as I said, I've been on the go for 48 hours, as you can hear. So what I'd really like is, anybody got anything they would like to ask me about applications or anything at all, and I will be here to help. Have you all heard about the Heart of England Community Foundation though? Yes. Has anybody had funding from us? No. Has anybody applied? No.
I think there might be people who are
definitely. It's Nyasha. He's not here.
Yeah, and Chris. Yeah, Chris is saying she's.
Yeah, we have a question.
Great.
Me and Becky were saying you have nice lips and a good tan.
That will be good enough for me.
I like the idea about the LGBT. I think that's a really good idea. Also, are you going to be doing anything with the oh God, what do you call it? The ethnic background, like black ethnic people?
I think all funders are on a journey here. We're all on a learning journey. For us, as the community foundation for this region that is full of diversity, we need to make sure that we are reaching all of the groups that we want. That's a really good question. So we've commissioned an external evaluator who is currently analysing all of our grant making. Who does it go to? Where does it go? And actually identifying gaps. We've just published, and it's on our website, our 3-year strategy.
I'll be reading that today when I get
Please
back
read
in.
it, because
I definitely will.
What I didn't want to do is, when Black Lives Matters and everything came to the fore, was throw out a statement, this is what the foundation's going to do. Actually, it's embedded throughout our strategy. So our board now absolutely reflects the diversity of this region, and I feel really proud of that, because I'm the only foundation in the country.
Yeah, because I think
yes.
I think if you just threw everything out, it wouldn't really stick. But because you've had thought about it and planned what you're going to do, it comes out really correct. So what you're saying is quite strong, and I'm really proud of what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Becky, also question. You know, when you were talking about having to speak to the people that you want to do a project for before you come with a funding thing, why do you have to do that? Why is that so important that you talk?
Sorry, I'm struggling to hear that. Why do we talk?
Why, when you're wanting to pitch a funding thing, do you have to talk to the community before you bring your funding?
Oh, it depends what the project is. If it's a project for the community, then we would hope that you have spoken to the community to make sure they want it.
But everybody in the community isn't going to want the same thing.
But
This is what I don't understand.
But it depends what your community is.
Yeah,
so I
but
don't mean the whole of Coventry. I mean, say it was a project for teenagers in an area, let's just say, I don't know, Henley, then we would like to see that some approach has been made to see that what you would like to provide for them is actually what they want. I don't mean going out and doing lengthy consultations. Just
but they might not know what they want. They might not know what's right for them.
I suppose.
So you could do something and then get people interested in it rather than ask them if they're interested to start with, because they might be interested in something they had no idea that they are going to like. So everyone will say, no, that's a bad idea. But if you just go and do it, then loads of people might decide, actually, I never ever thought I would like that, but I really liked it. And now my life's changed. Yeah,
and I do get that. But the majority of the money that we distribute isn't ours. It's donors. And donors want to see that these projects are needed.
I suppose it shows people like Tina that the project, you're really interested in it because you've already done some kind of like
a pilot.
Be like, you really care about this, and you can tell because I've already talked to these people.
Can you make up a survey?
I do like you. I don't even know how to answer that. Well, you know. We'd like to think it wasn't made up, I have to be honest. But if I'm honest with you, I suppose we wouldn't really have any way of evidencing that. But surely you'd want to plan a project that you know would be welcomed in some way.
I would like to plan a project that I think people would not show interest in, but once it was there, they would, because it was something they never ever thought about before. So they would automatically just say no. But once they got a chance to, it would be different.
I suppose the other thing is what we do as a foundation. If you go on our website, like I said to you about people spending time writing funding bids for actually a programme they're not eligible for, actually upsets me because you've got better things to do. We encourage you to call us. Just if you've got an idea and you think, oh, actually, I wonder if that's fundable, then we are very open. We encourage groups to speak to us before applying.
Tina, I think that brings us nicely into a question from Melissa
in
the chat. So in the chat, Melissa's asked whether you have access support for people to write their bids. Is there any help available for people?
Yes, there are. And what we don't do, say we have an application and some of their documentation, we don't just reject it. We speak to the groups and say, look, your equality statement, it needs updating. You haven't got a safeguarding policy. And actually what we're finding is that we're doing more of this than what we used to do. Back in the day, there are helper agencies that were there that provided all of these workshops, but now we're all in a position where people have there's been a bit of a mission drift with some of these. And I don't know where you would naturally go in Coventry now for that kind of support. We do a lot of funding workshops. So the best thing you could do is get on our mailing list, but we do workshops, particularly when, so the LGBTQI one I'm talking about, we will be doing a workshop. So if you sign up to our newsletter, you can sign up for that. And we go through the whole application process. What you need to attach, what makes a good application. So yes, we do offer that support.
Is it okay if you put the link in the chat box to that, please?
To our website, of course.
With the LGBTQ.
It's not open yet. It's not open, but it's coming.
When will it be open roughly? Do you know?
I think in about 4 weeks.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, I'll keep an eye out for that, but if you could put the link in.
Of course. And then, we might have other programmes that you could apply to as well.
Yeah, well, world domination takes time.
When is the break?
I've got a feeling you might get it.
When is the break?
We're gonna be breaking sort of shortly. So what I'd like to do is bring Bryony back in if she's still available, and because I think there might be some questions that Tina and Bryony could both give sort of different different aspects to. But just before we open it up a bit, Melissa's also asked, in terms of Tina's funds, what the turnaround time is for decisions. Does it depend on your different funding streams? Or
one thing I was going to say, that we've all learned things from the pandemic, and what we've learned is that we can do things better and quicker. And although I would love to be all in a room with you today, Zoom is very functional. So we've reduced our turnaround time from 16 weeks to 8.
brilliant.
So, and to be honest, depending on where you come in, it's generally 4 to 6 weeks for an outcome. So,
Brilliant. Brilliant. And can I just say, as someone who's been doing fundraising for a very long time, I think your single point of entry idea is brilliant, because I think there's a danger that you end up tying yourself in knots trying to make your project fit different sort of project strands, and that sort of following the funding is a real danger. And that's something I think we'll explore in a future session, about making sure that you're starting with your project and not starting with the funding.
Start with the project, yes, and then, but thank you. We have received good feedback on it, so hopefully it will all go without a glitch in the autumn.
Are there any sort of more general questions for both Bryony and Tina around? One thing I wondered about was, you know, sort of common pitfalls. Are there things that you see again and again that just make you go, "Dong!" when you sort of see funding applications coming in?
Yeah,
I'm making notes as well for myself.
it's just when we have applicants to a programme that they just don't meet the criteria, and they try and fit the criteria, and then it will just come out of panel. And again, it's just disappointing, because I know how hard it is to write bids. So the project doesn't meet the criteria, don't try and make it fit.
Hello, we've got a question.
We'll just hear from Bryony first in response to that one, and then we'll come back to you for your question, okay?
Oh, thanks, wait me a sec. Yeah, I think all I'd say in response to that, totally agree with Tina, is, you know, read the guidance. You know, it's really understanding what the fund is about, and you know, checking your project with somebody. They don't need to be an expert, they don't even need to be a funder. Often when somebody else reads it, they're kind of a great set of eyes to say, did you mean that? And actually you go, well, no, I didn't actually, but that's how it's through. So just constantly getting somebody to check and challenge what you're writing against the guidance. That I think, you know, I'm fully supportive of what Tina said, that is the most common and most frustrating, because people have spent so much time writing an application that fundamentally, you know, for whatever reason, it either doesn't fit or a message has been missed somewhere.
Yeah, and what we've done now, rather than all of these waiting weeks and weeks, if it's ineligible, we will tell the organisation straight away. They don't have to wait 8 weeks to find out that they're not going to get funded. And what we will do is either signpost to websites that can help and explain really clearly why they weren't eligible for this programme. I think it's disappointing, and when some funders don't give constructive feedback, because it's not helping the organisations to move forward.
Absolutely, yeah, I'd agree with that. It's very frustrating when you don't know whether it's just that it was incredibly competitive.
Exactly,
and you could have been funded if there'd been slightly less applications, or whether it was just you'd missed the mark completely. And there was a quick question from Lucy just about whether Heart of England funds individuals, but I think you said, Tina, that only through your City of Culture programmes, that generally you're there to fund community groups rather than
with a governance structure.
And there's a question from Melissa about whether you can include professional development and self-care in bids that you're writing.
Yes, absolutely, yes. And that's another thing, you know, and I know a lot often it's always like, we've got to find a project, you've got to find a project, it's got to be different from what you've done before. It doesn't. If that project works, then why wouldn't we fund it again? So yes, we would absolutely support professional development and self-care, yes.
Yeah, so would we. I think, you know, professional development, particularly developing your creative practice, that is what the entire fund is focused on. And within project grants, you know, one of the questions is, how will this develop your practice and the people that you're, you know, either working with or reaching? So I think, you know, as a development agency, and I think all funders sort of are we're developmental. That idea of, you know, people progressing and developing their skills is always kind of central, really. And self-care, I think, is, you know, it's becoming increasingly something that everyone is talking about, you know, and right, you know, from things like paying yourself properly so that you have a fee that covers, you know, your time and the kind of demands on that time, so that, you know, we don't want to see people squeezing their fee so that they're overworked, underpaid, you know, and have all the stresses of trying to run a household or their business or whatever else on top of that. So yeah, I think the first most basic thing around self-care is pay yourself properly, and think about the extra things that you need, and particularly if it is around access support as well. In my presentation, I kind of covered the pre-application advice, but obviously if you were to apply to us when you write an application, within that application you would include all of the access support that you need to run the project, and that would be funded additionally to the project cost. So if you were applying for £15,000, there's a threshold there with Arts Council, it's overs or unders. Actually, if £1,000 was access costs, you would still go to that under 15,000 panel, even though you might have 15,000 plus the 1,000 for your access costs, so that you're never disadvantaged for including those costs. It's far from it.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to flash back to the Fargo office because I think someone there had a question. Sorry, I don't know everyone's names, but Becky, did you have a question?
Oh yeah. If you applied for funding for something and then once you had the money, you completely changed your mind of what you were going to do, are you allowed to do that?
You do ask very good questions, don't you? So you've had funding, we'll do a scenario for a project that you've consulted on, of course, and then you change your mind and you want to do something completely different. Is that what you mean, Tam?
Yeah.
We do grant variations, but you would have to explain why you weren't going to run the project that we funded you for. It's a conversation. Because what we want is the money to go to the people that need it. So
yeah, it would still be that, but if you just had a much better idea in the meantime,
it would. We could do a grant variation, but it would be a conversation with you and the foundation on why this project needs to be changed.
What if what you're doing can be done for free, but you still apply for money for it?
Well, I hope that would come out in the assessment process, to be honest. I don't think any projects can really run for free, just what Bryony was saying, you know.
I'm not planning on doing all this. I just wondered how, I just want to know how it works, because I know humans lie.
I did work for an organisation once that had really complicated procedures, and I questioned why they had these procedures, and it turned out it was a match funding scheme, and way back in the past someone had invented fake arts organisations and fake businesses and got the fake businesses to sponsor the fake arts organisations, and he did go to prison for that.
I would fake a survey, but I wouldn't do the rest.
And you are right, and I'd like to think that everybody's honest, and I would say 99.99% of the grants we give are, but through the pandemic we were subjected to some potential fraudulent applications. But I have a very good team of grants officers that check. The first thing we'll do is check a website, check a social media. We can see if these people exist. And the biggest giveaway is when the bank account is based somewhere else, and there's just lots of trigger points, but we have to do all that because, as I've said, we are managing other people's money. So it goes through a process, and I hope that we would pick it up.
No, but yeah, I just wondered, because I didn't know how strict it was, like if you did have a better idea, if you'd have to apply again or just because I have ideas all the time.
Just to give you an example of that, we've got a big funded programme within City of Culture that's funded by the Community Fund. and the way that we were proposing to deliver the project, because of COVID, it was really hard for us to do that. So we went back to them and we discussed a way of changing the project. We said, you know, obviously we can't do this anymore. We can't bring people together to do that.
Yeah.
Can we change it to find a different way? And because we were still trying to deliver the same outcomes, we still wanted to make the same benefit happen. The fact that we were changing the way that we would work with people was fine with them, but we did have to go back to get their permission before we could do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really key thing, Laura. Always talk to the funder before you change anything. It would save a lot of problems at the end.
Are there any other questions for Tina and Bryony?
Mine is for Tina. So Tina, you know, you spoke about how you guys are going to have the one application that organisations can apply to, and then you find them a funder. Would that cover core cost funding? I think that's the biggest issue for a lot of small art organisation, is the core cost funding part and paying for their staff.
Yeah, what my donors probably wouldn't do is just fund a project that's just running costs. But as with running costs are part of a project, so absolutely, we used to call it full cost recovery. You should not be out of pocket for running a project. So the answer is yes. We will absolutely fund core costs.
Thank you.
And full cost recovery is perhaps something we can look at in a future session as well, just to kind of look at how you can make sure that you're able to cover some of your central costs. If you're running 3 or 4 different projects, you know, it might be that you know, your office costs or your marketing costs, you know, some of those can go into each of those projects, but we can talk about that in another session, just to sort of explain some of the thinking behind that, because funders all have different approaches about how they will and won't accept some of your overhead cost. So I can talk you through some of that in another session. And I thought also it might be helpful in another session if we actually look at Grantium together. I can share my screen and talk you through Grantium, because I know it can be quite daunting for people, and it's not the easiest or most user-friendly. I'm sure Bryony would agree. It has its limitations. So
yes,
it's a minefield. I'm on it now. I've been funded through the Arts Council, which we're just going through a little bit of fine-tuning with some final paperwork, but it's a minefield. And honestly, without having the support of like the City of Culture team and the producer, and being put in touch with a grant writer application, there is no way I would be able in a position to do anything. I probably would have just thrown the towel in, because it's just so much, so overwhelming. And I feel like I've dealt with a lot in my career and experiences across the world and everything else, but it's such a daunting experience. And so any additional support, workshops, databases where you can be in touch with grant applications or writers or anything like that would be such a useful tool for somebody who's coming into a new organization or wanting to start a project, because it's so overwhelming.
It is. And the Grantium platform is hard as well, especially for DYCP, because I just applied for mine. I had help from a producer at the Belgrade, and it was hard, it was long. And there's just like a lot of things that I think maybe needed to be added to make it a bit easier. Also, even adding a section that covers work that's in kind, because it didn't have that. So you can't like really include things like that in your stuff, as you could include it for like, I applied for council funding, I included it in my council funding, and Hearts of England was quite easy as well, but that one is really the hardest.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, we are, as I said, when I said that we might be relaunching some guidance later this year, all of that is kind of with these things in mind. So trying to kind of simplify the system, make sure that there's a really nice feedback loop. It sounds like Heart of England really have that, you know, and I think that's definitely something for the Arts Council to work on, and also looking at how we can make Grantium, you know, more accessible, more user-friendly. You know, I completely concur with what you're saying. It is challenging, and I think in a world of sexy technology, Grantium is not one of them, so it's not intuitive. So yeah, obviously if you can kind of just look at it even to see that it is almost feels a bit HTML days, maybe too young to know what that was, but we are, you know, we are working on it, and that kind of feedback is really helpful. And yeah, you know, it is wonderful when you can get support. In many ways you shouldn't have to, you know, it shouldn't be difficult, there shouldn't be barriers there. But if somebody can support you in the meantime while we get it to work a little better, and then any feedback that you have on that new process, you know, we're always keen to kind of make it better. And we do know that there are some barriers, and that is why we will happily pay for an access support worker if you have additional needs that mean that would be useful.
Yeah.
Bryony, can I just check, am I right in thinking that if you have dyslexia, there's some support that you can submit bids as a recording rather than written? Is that still the case?
So we can't do recordings, but we would definitely be able to support with an access support worker to describe and make that sort of transition from what you're saying into Grantium. Yeah, so neurodiversity, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think on that point, that's something that we're looking at as an organisation. It's all right, if you know, don't you? You know, I have to write bids myself to tender for local authority work, so I'm used to it. But it's quite scary when, what do I say? What should I put? Is this the right words? So a couple of months ago, we launched a video application. It's just £1,000. It was a pilot. But we attracted particularly a lot of younger people. I don't know whether Tyler's on this, but Tyler had a grant around Fridays, but it really worked well. So we're looking at different ways rather than your standard application form of how can we support our sector. So the videos went well, and I think it's likely we'll do something like that again.
Tina, can I ask you, you mentioned earlier that your decisions, you've got a sort of panel of people that make decisions. Can you tell us a bit more about that panel? Because I know sometimes with funders, we assume that panel is going to be a load of, you know, pale, stale, middle-aged men. But knowing you, Tina, I'm sure that's not the case.
No, that's not right.
Of England.
So we have donors, such as Coventry Building Society and Wesleyan. And why they love to sit on the panel is that sometimes they part fund things. So then it saves their budget, and actually they're joining forces. We have Warwickshire CVS, we have 2 local councillors, and we have community representation. And the only person from the foundation is one of our trustees chairs it. We think it's important that we have people out in the communities that tell us what the needs are. So for the City of Culture, it's a mixture of culture staff, and then we obviously present. So we have a number of different panels, but our main one is made up of donors and community reps. Brilliant,
thank you. There's one more question in the chat just about large print writing. I think, Bryony, that would probably come back to the scribe sort of response.
Yeah, so our guidance would be available in large print, and then however you wanted to write the application, the best way to do it is to do it offline in whatever format works best for you. And then you would work with an access support worker to take that from whatever format is the right format for you. So that might be verbal, that might be large print, BSL, into Grantium, unless there is a way that we can accept it. For example, we can accept BSL. But as Tina said, you know, we are also looking at video, and, you know, it just takes time sometimes for a massive machine and a huge organisation to kind of move. Yeah, we're definitely, you know, we're definitely keen to sort of make far more accessible ways, but at the moment, the best way, if you can't access Grantium, is for somebody to help you do that, and we will pay for that, for that person to help. So you know, as Tina said, no one should be out of pocket to deliver a project, certainly not to make an application.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think there's one more question from Chrissy, and then I think after that I'll take one more question, and then I think we'll go to a break. So Chrissy.
Yeah, this is for Tina. So with the Hearts of England, do you guys have a limit of amount of applications you can apply? So I've already got funding, but I've seen another application. Can I still apply or not, because we've been funded for the same project?
You can. So what happens actually, Chris, is that over the years, we've, like, Coventry Building Society used to be a standalone fund along with others. So groups would go to them, they'd go to them. And I thought, hang on a minute, this is a little unfair, that they now all run through us, that you can only say yes in answer. You can have another grant, yes.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Is there a final question from anyone? If anyone wants to wave, shout.
Don't be greedy, Chrissy.
Leave some for Corey.
Honestly, if anyone is and you are the right type of organisation, honestly, please do come to us, and I'm more than happy to provide some advice on some of our funds.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that's probably a good point to sort of close there. So can I just say a huge thank you to Bryony and to Tina for absolutely putting a human face on the funder for us this morning. It's been really great to hear from you both, and also just to reiterate that that I'm here to support as well. Sorry, Becky, Benji, did one of you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just had one last question. Now that we know you guys, if we need to apply, can't we just text you, then go through all the writing?
I think unfortunately, because these schemes have to be fair and transparent, what we can't do is a sort of Boris Johnson kind of texting, but what we can't have is a sort of backdoor into the funds, because that wouldn't be fair on other applicants. But
if the government does it, then you can.
But Becky, what I can definitely do is I can help with the process, breaking down the process and working out the steps towards being able to submit, so that your projects can be judged alongside other people's projects as well. And I can put sort of questions to Tina and to Bryony for you. Bryony's given us her email address, so we can take advantage of that. But I think I would suggest that what we do is make sure that we use these contacts wisely. So there's lots of things that I can help you with. So try me first, so that we make sure that when we go to Tina and Bryony, we're only going to them for the things that we can't answer in any other way. Does that make sense? Is that fair?
But if you want to, if you go onto our website, it does say sign up to our newsletter. Every single new programme we bring in gets communicated either on Twitter or on our newsletter. So I would encourage you to sign up, because I'm always trying to bring in new programmes, and who knows what this year will bring.
Thank you, Tina. There was a final point from Josh where he's saying, is there anywhere that we can read successful grant applications? I think that's something I can look into, because I know from my own grant applying, it makes such a difference when you start to see 2 or 3 different applications to the same fund from different people. You start to get a bit of a feel for how different people are doing it. So that's something I can look at. I can see if I can get some permission from people that I know to share their grant applications with you. It's something that the funders are not allowed to do, I think, probably because of confidentiality. But if I talk to people that I know who've applied to things, I can see if I can get permission to share perhaps something like project grants. If I can show you 2 or 3 different applications to project grants, so you get a feel for the fact that actually you can apply to it in lots of different ways. That they don't all.
We do publish case studies so that you can see, just a wide variety of people getting funding. But yeah, Laura's absolutely right. Unfortunately, due to GDPR, we can't share the actual application. But anything that's been redacted, or any way that you can see one, it definitely is useful.
Oh, just one more. There is I work with an organisation in the West Midlands called Get Grants. I would suggest having a look at on his website, a guy called John Ellery.
I can send a link to that because I use it as well.
Yeah, and he's really, really good. And I often do workshops with him, and I know Arts Council have, and the National Lottery. So that's just another, and that's more of a conversation with him and with funders, a bit like today, but I think Get Grants are actually really good.
Yeah, I agree. Brilliant. Well, can I just say thank you both very much indeed. We're going to take a break now, and then when we come back, we've got one more speaker. We've got Lilli Geissendorfer from Jerwood Arts, who's dialing in from a conference to join us today. So she's going to join us at 12. So if I can ask everyone to be back here just before 12. And thank you to Bryony, thank you to Tina. I'm sure you'll be hearing from us.
Good, I hope so.
Bye.
Good to meet you all. Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Lilli, just to explain, although there's 15 people in the group, not everyone is here in the session today because everyone obviously is working around their other commitments, they're working and things. So we do record the sessions, but they're just for use within the 15. So it doesn't go any further than that. So we won't quote you or hold you to anything that's said in the conversation, but if that's comfortable for you. And just to tell you a little bit about what we've covered so far this morning, we've had Bryony Windsor from Arts Council who's talked us through project grants and through developing your creative practice, and given us a bit of a sort of heads up about what the Arts Council are sort of trying to do with their funding, a little bit of background about their sort of strategy. And then we also heard from Tina Costello, who's the chief exec of our local community foundation, who talks about the funding that they provide for community organisations. So what we're trying to do in today's session is cover a range of different types of funding. So we know that your funding won't be relevant for everyone in the group, but it might be relevant for some. What we would like to do is perhaps if you're able to sort of tell us a bit more about you know, an overview of Jerwood and then sort of take some questions from us, that would be brilliant. Can I just check if everyone's here? Quick thumbs up again. Is everyone back? Yep. Excellent. I think there's a couple of people missing, but they'll join us as they come back. So if I could introduce you to Lilli Geissendorfer, who is the Chief Executive of Jerwood Arts. Jerwood Arts are one of our funders for City of Culture. They're supporting Contain Strong Language, the poetry and spoken word festival, which is coming up shortly. And in the presentation that you had for today, there is a link to a toolkit session in October, which I'd encourage all of the writers in the group to sign up and make sure that you're there. Lilli's colleague John will be joining us at that event. So if I could encourage you to sign up for that. So Lilli, can I hand over to you to tell us a bit more about Jerwood Arts?
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. Thanks for inviting me. Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's really lovely always to have a chance to, I think Laura said in her email, put a face to the funders and say a bit more about what we're trying to do. So yeah, at the moment I'm sitting in a field in Leeds at the Holbeck Slung-Lows headquarters, where they're having their annual conference. So apologies if my sound's not great. And also the connection's good, but it's not good enough for me to get my presentation and my kind of classic slides about Jerwood Arts up. So what I'm going to do is put just our website in the chat, and I'm very happy for you to be having a mosey on that while I'm talking. Because I mean, like for so many organisations now, the website really is the window. So I'm director of Jerwood Arts. I've been director for nearly 4 years, and we exist to support early career artists and develop their practices and support them to make that critical next step into a more established career, where it's not just that they feel like being an artist is their sole core main professional purpose in life, but it also starts to hopefully take up kind of most of their time. So we're kind of looking for artists to support who are at that tipping point, and have already got a bit of a track record, have already kind of shown that commitment and calling, I guess, some people call it, to an artistic creative practice, but are not yet having professional performances or commissions realised, aren't yet in those professional institutions.
Sorry, Lilli, I don't know if you can hear me.
Everything okay? I can see and hear you guys.
I can hear you. I can't hear Laura though.
No, Laura's frozen a bit. Is that Josh? Thank you, Josh. Yeah, well, maybe I'll just keep talking. Maybe Laura will come in, log back in again.
Yeah, she was probably pausing to say that you'd frozen.
Oh. Yeah, I think my connection seems quite good right now.
Yeah,
yeah,
no, we can hear you very clearly.
Great, thanks, Corey. So we're quite a small funder. You've heard from Arts Council England this morning. Of course, they're the big daddy in England. We're relatively small. We have around 1.4 million a year to spend, and that money comes from our endowment. So an endowment is a fund that is invested in the stock market. And so one of my jobs is to try and steer our investment managers on how to invest that and look out for things like where that money is being put and how it might be being used and abused. So things like an ethical investment policy are in my remit. At least for me, it's kind of two sides of the same coin in terms of where the money comes from and then the kind of ethics of how we try and support artists with that. So that 1.4 million is the interest generated off the endowment. And at the moment, I checked the valuation this morning, it's worth around 33 million. So 33 million invested makes about 1.4 million a year. And on top of that, I fundraise and work in partnership with other funders like Arts Council England, but also currently PRS Foundation for music, Esme Fairbairn Foundation, the Garfield Weston Foundation, Art Fund, who work in galleries and heritage. So lots of different funders we might work with, who are also really passionate about our mission to support early career artists. So on average every year is probably more like 2 million that we're spending, but it fluctuates depending on how good my fundraising efforts are. So what we try and do is have a balance of programs, some for individual artists to apply directly to us, and some for organizations to apply to us. Sometimes we do open calls, sometimes we do nomination processes, and we try to kind of think very carefully about what's the right process, what's the right target and kind of method, I guess, for different programs. So one of the biggest programs that we design and run is called the Western Jerwood Creative Bursaries Programme, which is very similar, I think, in some ways to the programme that you're all part of. It's also funded by Arts Council's Transforming Leadership Programme in large chunk of it, and lots of other funders as well. And it supports 50 arts organisations, and that's all kinds of art forms. So we fund all art forms, and we also fund across the UK. So we work with Creative Scotland and Arts Council Wales, and also try and work in Northern Ireland. Although that is always really challenging. I don't know, somehow the water presents its own barrier. But yeah, so it's 50 organisations that are supported to create 50 fellowships for early career artists and creatives, and they get a year-long job with a wraparound professional development and leadership programme, which because of the pandemic has largely been delivered online this time, although we are hoping for an in-person event, fingers crossed, in November. And a organisational development programme for the host organisations. And that organisational development programme is a supported programme by experts in inclusion and organisational change to help organisations think about who they're reaching, who they're recruiting, and how they can have a more inclusive culture overall. The programme's really focused on socioeconomic diversity and the intersections of particularly ethnic diversity and disability with that. And it's been a really, really challenging time to run it through the pandemic, but almost more important to try and keep going with it and to get those opportunities out there. We've just got all of the 50 fellows in their jobs about a month ago now, and it's been absolutely amazing to see them coming together online and starting to connect with each other. They're incredible. So that's a program I'm particularly passionate about. And we've just, I'll say one more specific program as an example of what we do. We've just launched a fund on Tuesday called the One-to-One Fund. And it's focused on collaboration. So it comes off the back of lots of conversations and some research that we did with artists we're supporting, successful and unsuccessful applicants to our funds over the last 12 months, where the need to connect with another artist and the difficulties of being able to collaborate in a normal way because of COVID have been really brought to the fore. So we were hearing a lot about how isolated artists were and how their practices were really suffering as a result of not being able to have those in-person connections. So we've designed a small fund specifically for 2 people to apply to at once, hence the one-to-one. And it's £2,000. It's a lump sum plus any access costs to make that the activity that they want to do possible for them. And we have tried to think carefully about the demand that we're getting and the levels of demand that we've been experiencing. And so one of the innovations is that it's for 2 people at a time, which really kind of foregrounding that collaborative nature. But the other thing that we're doing is we've redesigned the application process and the selection method. So one of the things that Jerwood is really known for is quite a robust peer review process in our assessing of applications. We work with around 90 artist advisors from across the UK who help assess applications and then come together as panels to make the final judgments. But over the last year or so, the demand has gone ever more steeply upwards, particularly for our individual programs for individuals. And so one of the things we thought it'd be interesting to experiment with is a different approach to that selection. The last fund we ran had over 1,200 applications. And I think the success rate for it was therefore less than 3%. And when you're talking about those kinds of numbers, the idea that those selected were somehow the best or the most talented is essentially meaningless. There were so many brilliant applications, and the level of competition is so out of kilter with the demand and the need that's clearly out there. So for this fund, we're taking quite a big risk, and we're going to focus on using a random number generator to make the selection. And the idea is that it is an equal chance for each application to be selected. And once it's selected, it's selected sort of 50 applications. We will go through them in order that they were sort of spat out by the random number generator and look at them for their eligibility and that they meet the key criteria. And as long as they do that, then they will receive the award. And we'll do that until we've run out of money, essentially. So we're hoping to make at least 35, possibly up to 40 awards with the One-to-One Fund. And it's open for application now for all artists that consider themselves early career. And there's lots on the website about how we're defining early career for this fund. And it's open till the 4th of October. So I think I've been talking for about 12 minutes straight. And I hope I've given a bit of an insight into sort of 2 very different programs that are running at the moment. One which I would imagine at least some of you would be eligible to apply to. So you should definitely check it out. And yeah, I'll stop there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lilli. I think your Creative Bursaries programme, I think you're working with Richard Watts and Change Creation as well as, so we're working with him on our Transforming Leadership programme. So he he's very involved with this cohort as well. So it's nice to sort of see there's some parallels between those two programs.
I think it's been amazing to have his support, and I think there's been real cross-learning, or I get the sense that he's learned a lot from you guys, and like, yeah, there's really nice connections there.
Thank you. I think the one-to-one fund is really interesting because it sort of demonstrates something we've talked about before about funders trying to kind of respond to what the sector is saying that it needs. So I think that's really interesting that you're sort of, you've identified a problem that artists are not able to collaborate in the way that they normally would, and you've developed a fund in response to that. I think that's a really interesting approach as an engaged funder, that you're constantly looking to respond.
I mean, I think we really try and listen. I mean, we're a small team. There's about 10 of us on the payroll, and then some permanent freelancers that work on specific programs. And we try and get out across the country as much as possible. And we try and stay connected to the artist advisors in our networks, and also listen to, I guess at any one time, we did a little count the other day. At the moment, we've got 89 kind of active awards with individuals, and about 112 organizations that we have a grant with that is currently underway. So that's very different levels of relationships and engagement, but we're always trying to listen to them and respond imaginatively. Our three kind of key words are imaginative, independent, and responsible. So we have to balance those three out in any initiative that we try. But I would say that we very rarely repeat a funding opportunity as a result, which lots of people find frustrating. So they go, when are you going to do that fund again? And I find myself going, well, we're going to do one that's similar, but we got lots of feedback that said this would be better like this. So yeah, we find ourselves evolving, I guess, is the funder word for it, quite a lot.
It's really interesting when you were saying about trying different approaches to decision making as well because of the volume of applications. I know from our own experience with you that your trustees are very interested and very engaged and sort of more involved than I think that perhaps they are in some other organisations. Could you say a little bit more about their sort of interest and how they like to get involved in the process?
Yes, sure. Yeah. So we have a board of trustees. I think there's currently 6 of them. I think we might be appointing some new ones soon. And they approve all grants over 15,000, I think. So we will take kind of a recommendations to them that have been through our assessors and in sort of internal selection panels. So that would be involving kind of our independent artist advisors and our own team. But for smaller grants, so like for the one-to-one fund, they approve the kind of overall lump sum, and then it's up to us as to how we make those final decisions. So yes, Laura, for bigger grants, so when we're kind of working closely to kind of support a bigger program of work that's like the Contain Strong Language and the poets, emerging poets as part of that, it's really important that I and John kind of work closely with those organisations to kind of, I guess, reflect both the trustees' interests. They're very keen that we work more nationally. They're also really keen that we work in art forms, like there's a balance of art forms across our funding. So sometimes I might get overexcited about circus, and suddenly we've got loads of circus stuff boiling up, and then they're like, what happened to literature? So they keep an eye on the overall kind of balance of things.
Brilliant, thank you. Can I open up to sort of questions? Has anyone got questions that they'd like to?
I have a question. I remember, Laura, you said before she came in, there's a writers program coming out of the Contain Strong Languages. In October, can I get more information on that?
Yes, certainly. There's a link to that in the PowerPoint presentation that Tam sent round.
Okay.
But I would suggest that all of you as a group should try and engage with that. Lilli's colleague John is going to be at that session, and Lilli, I think you're coming up to Coventry for some of the Contain Strong Language events as well. So
yes,
yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Any other questions about Jerwood or about Lilli's approach to grant making? Is there anything anyone else would like to ask?
I've got a question for you guys, if not.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, I'm always interested in whether you've heard of Jerwood, and if so, in what context. Melissa's saying no, Josh is saying maybe yes.
Yeah, their name tends to float around in Beat Freaks circles.
They twins.
I've heard of it, but two other people haven't heard of it here.
I've
Thank you.
heard of the contained strong language thing.
Brilliant. Well,
That's great.
Yeah, hopefully everyone comes to that. I think my own, I think I used to think Jerwood Arts was more visual arts than broad art forms. So it's been really interesting for me to know that you're interested in sort of all art forms. That wasn't something that I perhaps was aware of so much, until until sort of just a few years ago. I was aware that you were cross art form.
Yes, that's really helpful actually, Laura. Yes, I think our visual arts programs have been, I guess, more high profile in some cases. We've run big awards and prizes, and kind of it's had more PR, I guess, maybe than some of our other work. But yes, definitely all art forms.
Could I ask a question? You mentioned access support for the one-to-one grants. Do you sort of provide access support for other grant making programs as well? Is that something that you've done?
Yes, so we've been building up our understanding of what artists need to make applications and the kind of labour that goes into that, and trying to improve how accessible the actual form is, and make sure that everything we're asking is information we actually need. So there's a whole range of things that we have developed. I'm just going to post in the chat here what's on offer around the one-to-one fund. So we'll pay for an access support worker to work with you if that's something that you regularly need, up to £200. We have 10-minute advice sessions, which are phone calls that you can book in with me and some of the team. So we have a big spreadsheet, and I think we've got about 40-50 slots available in the next few weeks for those, and they tend to be really well received and help people just ask that question that in many cases they say, I think this is a silly question, or I should probably know this, and it's never a silly question. It's always a really good question, and it often leads us to just tweak the wording or change, add a bit of information to the fund, the guidance that helps clarify it for other people. So I always say, if you are thinking, what does that mean? You won't be alone. Someone else will be thinking exactly that. And as we do try and test our guidance on 5-6 artists that we're working with and get feedback before it goes live, but we're also, they're still in a certain bubble. It's hard for us to kind of switch mindsets and really take that critical judgment on how we're explaining things. So we're really grateful for feedback and inquiries. Yeah, really happy for people to get in touch.
Sorry, I keep forgetting to unmute myself because the traffic's noisy here. But I'll make sure that everyone has the sort of contact details for Jerwood and is able to sign up for the chat when they're at the right sort of point, if we're looking at applications. And I think perhaps in a future session we should look at one-to-one application process together as a group. I think that would be quite a useful exercise to have a look at it and see, because I think it's a really interesting offer. It's really unusual. It's not something that I'm aware of any other funders doing at the moment, so I think it'd be a good one for us to have a look at.
No, I mean, certainly not. I mean, there are funds that support collaborative creative processes and workshopping, but it's usually always one person has to be the responsible one who makes the application. And we sort of wanted to push that and say, no, could we share that? Could that be shared more? And yeah, we had really interesting conversations about that. so yeah, I'm really interested if you do look at it for feedback, good and bad. It's full of ideas, and some of them won't turn out to have been very good, but you can't really know until you try it. So this conference opened with a session on how to be more pirate, from which I took that the first one was to go outside your comfort zone, to step outside the edges of your world. And I thought, oh, well, we've just been doing that. So I think the one-to-one fund is definitely slightly outside our comfort zone. So yeah, really keen to get feedback.
Brilliant, thank you. And can I ask if anyone else has got any questions? I'm conscious that this is Lilli's lunch break, so we ought to let her disappear for some food shortly. But any final questions before we say thank you? Any thumbs up? Nope. Brilliant, excellent. In that case, Lilli, I'll just say thank you very much indeed, particularly for giving up most of your lunch break to come and dial in and talk to us. But it's really helpful to understand a bit more of some of the thinking around where your programs come from and how you're trying to be responsive. Becky, Benji, did either of you want to say anything? Did you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We
It's
were
good to
going
see you all.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So thank you so much, Lilli, and I'm sure we'll be in touch again. And I'll look forward to seeing you in 3 dimensions at some of the Contain Strong Language events. So
it's beyond exciting. I'm out meeting people in the flesh every Thursday, Friday for the whole of September, and it's just fantastic. It's beyond exciting. So yeah, thank you all for having me, and please do get in touch or get Laura to put you in touch. Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Say goodbye.
Thanks very much indeed, Lilli.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So if the rest of us could stay on the call just for sort of 5 minutes, I'd just be quite interested to sort of hear from you guys about, you know, anything that's come up today that you think is useful, anything that's come up today that's been frustrating, anything you think would be useful to explore in future sessions. Shall I go around sort of the group kind of one by one? Josh, is there anything you'd like to ask or?
I can just make a comment because I missed the last round of DYCP funding and was feeling a bit out of the loop. So this was actually really nice to kind of get my thinking back on track. So yeah, and also the one-to-one fund, like I'd love to collaborate on animation with other people in the group as well. So just throwing that out there.
Brilliant. I think that would be a really interesting one for us to look at as a group, because I think we can, you know, for those of you who are less experienced fundraisers, it would be a good one to cut your teeth on. For those of you who are more experienced, it's a really unusual fund, so I think it's one that's worth looking at. And I think with Jowood, it's a good shot across the bow. It's a good way to kind of just get yourselves in front of them, just make Jowood more aware of your practice, because I think it's useful to, I think we talked in the last session about building your relationships with funders, so it feels like a good way to sort of start that process. So yeah, I think let's look at that. I had an example from the Developing Your Creative Practice that I just wanted to tell you about briefly. Someone that I know who is, she's a creative producer rather than a creative herself, and she's just been funded through Developing Your Creative Practice. She's been doing projects, she's been running a program that connects artists with schools, and she's applied in her own right as a creative producer to developing your creative practice with 2 schools, where she's going to be resident in the schools as a creative producer to connect schools to artists. And I thought it was quite an unusual one, because she's not an artist, but she's still been successful through that program because it's about her practice as an individual. So it's about her saying, I've been working with an organization, but now I want to see whether I could be an independent freelance creative producer, and this is the opportunity for me to do that. I think that's quite an interesting one, that you don't necessarily have to be a practicing artist to look at developing your creative practice through that scheme. Melissa, have you got any reflection on today about what's been useful?
Yeah, I just found it really interesting. It's, you know, I've toyed about with doing funding bids and started them and then stopped them, and yeah, so it's all a minefield, isn't it? So it's nice just to have the time to sort of unpick exactly what the things are and talk to the organisations in depth about it. So yeah, I mean, I think I'd really like to explore the developing your own practice, as well as the project one and that one-to-one. So I think any conversations that we could have around those, I think it would be good for us as a group. Just simply, you know, even if we don't apply for the developing your own practice this time, it's still good to know what we want to get out of our own practice. So just doing that as our own professional development, and then, you know, it's about carving that time to think that way for your own practice, isn't it? So yeah. But just thank you for today. It's been really interesting.
I think for a lot of you in the group, it might the developing your creative practice might be, you know, when you come to the end of the Transforming Leadership Programme, that might be the point that's pivotal. You know, she talked about that, you know, when's the point when you need that step change in your practice. That might be an interesting thing to sort of think about as the exit route from this programme for some of you. But we can certainly look at that. I met with Alex from this group recently to look at a project grants application with her, and what I was able to do was give her just some, like, break it down into some steps that are maybe a little bit less scary. And we will look at Grantium in a future session, because Grantium is shit. There's no two ways about it. You know, apparently I've heard from people in the Arts Council that it was only ever meant to be a temporary system while they got a bespoke, proper, you know, intuitive system built, but then they had their funding cut and they weren't able to do that, so they were stuck with something that was only ever meant to be.
It's not creative.
Yeah, it's not intuitive, it's not creative, it's the worst portal in the world, and they all hate it as well. But they sort of, I think,
for a different type. It's not for creative brains, is it? It's not for us. It's mad.
No, I've been fundraising for 20 years and I don't think I've ever had an engagement with Grantium that didn't involve me having to ring the helpline. So it's just, you know, it's not the creative, it's not helpful. And Corey, are you still with us? Have you got any reflections on today or sort of next steps?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting just to hear, obviously, the different processes, what's been looked out for. I'm kind of stuck in the middle, so I applied for Heart of England, been through the Arts Council. Like I said on the call, it's just a minefield. One thing that is kind of, it sticks in my mind is what is considered art. Again, you know, in terms of creative, because I traditionally or typically don't come from the visual art or the arts world, and I'm more in the fashion and the design and the graphics. So it's like, I don't have to kind of try and feed into different funding pots to cater for what I want to do, or where they kind of say combined arts, then I have to find a way to combine it all together to fit into that pot. And it just feels like, I don't know, is it the right place? I mean, I've done art things, but I don't know, it just feels a little bit schizophrenic.
Yeah, I'd agree. I want one of my notes that I've made for today is to have a look at the BFI and at the Fashion Council as well, because I think as a group we should maybe have a look at where are those funding things that are a bit more cross, you know, less siloed about what they do. So I think maybe that would be a useful thing for us to look at as well. And also design. I think it'd be interesting to see what we can find around design, because I know there's a few of you in the group where that might be relevant. So I think we should be looking at that. We have got I've been in touch with someone from the Local Economic Partnership who's going to come and talk to us about more kind of growth support for sort of more commercial or semi-commercial businesses. So we will start to look at some other types of funding as well through these sessions.
Is there a creative council which oversees kind of the creative sector as a whole, or is it still just broken up into the kind of the different?
It seems to be sort of broken up. So there's sector skills councils for different aspects of the creative sector. So and there's one that's more focused on media, and there's one that's more focused on you know, sort of the creative industries as a sort of big umbrella. But maybe we could have a look at those sort of sector skills councils in another session as well. But that I think that thing about, because I know a lot of people who use film in their practice who struggle around the differentiation between BFI and Arts Council about who will and won't fund sort of film stuff. So I think let's have a look at sector skills councils and design funding. I think would be useful. And sort of design awards and stuff. I'll move on. Tam, is there any sort of comments or reflections you want to bring up. I don't know if Tam's still with us. No. Okay. Oh, sorry, Melissa. You've got to go. See you again soon. Nyasha, did you want to come in and say anything or any reflections on today?
Well, thank you for organising all these, because they are really, really useful. So, and it's always interesting. And thank you also for offering to work with us one-to-one, which I'm definitely going to take you up on the offer for, because I did find it a little bit frustrating. I think the first two sections, very great to hear from those two funders, but having secure funding from them, and I do this as part of my business model, so it's kind of very frustrating to hear things being repeated back to you when you're like, I feel like I'm ticking all the boxes. So it was actually really nice to hear from the third funder who kind of, that was really authentic, of like, do you know what, I'm not going to sit here and say that the best applications got it, because there's so much good work being done out there. I think, it's useful, and it's very difficult when you're trying to submit things that you care passionately about. So I very much echo how Josh was feeling as well, about DYCP. It's a knockback, and it takes a while, because it's not mechanical what we're doing. We're doing stuff because we're passionate about it and we believe it will affect change. So yeah, it's a tough one. That resilience factor is important. But thank you for organising with these. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant, thank you. Lucy, is there anything you wanted to say, come in or reflect on?
No, I'm fine, thank you. Really brilliant. Thanks so much for organising it.
Thank you. And Chrissy, any comments?
I think it was good to actually meet the faces behind the funding, and I agree with Nyasha as well in terms of funding, because at Morocco, so I work with Laura, my role is producing, and I'm the one that's actively pushing everyone to look for funding, because even with things like Heart of England and Art Council, the questions that they ask and even the documents that they want, when you're a small organisation and you just started up, because I know I'm starting my own agency, we don't have those documents. So it can actually put you off funding. But for me, I'm the same as Nyasha, is like, we're passionate about doing these things. Like we, especially when there's only a few Black-led art organisations in your city, you expect to be funded. So I think for me, it would be really good if, I can get a one-to-one with you for my business that I'm starting, and obviously for Laura Morocco, because I'm the driving force in Morocco to say we need to apply for funding. If we can't beat them, join. So absolutely, kind of I'm that voice. So I think it would be really good to also apply for those fundings, but also to learn to fundraise for ourselves, because I'm very big on sustainability. I don't like relying on people, because we've had so many projects that we couldn't get funding have dropped. So I think the one-to-ones with you would help us know how we can sustain our business model, where we don't have to rely on like applications, because like she said, like Tina said, it does take so much. It's taken me 4 days to do both 3 different applications in the past 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, I don't get paid for that, and we don't have the time along with projects. So it was good, but I feel like it hasn't changed my perspective on funding, how I see funders. I will apply for them, but I'm still a bit iffy with they fund projects. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that point you made about the documents and sort of policies and things like that as well. I absolutely hear you on that, because I've had that same situation where funders, sometimes, I'm not suggesting the ones we spoke to today, but some funders, they almost putting extra hurdles in the way just to weed out more people, so that there's less people get to the end point. We had a situation where I'm based, where a local authority funder, suddenly everyone had to have an environmental policy. So what we did was we got a template environmental policy, and we all filled it in. So we all had exactly the same policy, but we were all able to tick the box to say that we had a policy.
That's like the council.
That was this was a sort of council one as well. I'm not based in Coventry, but we can look at some of those, those template documents and where we can get them and how we can share stuff, because I think it's that thing of just all being able to help each other to jump through the hoops that sometimes are put in the way of us by funders. And Becky, Benji, can I come to you to see if any reflections, thoughts? How did you feel about today? Oh, you're on mute.
What did you want us to say?
Just any final questions or reflections on today? Next steps? Was it useful? What did you think?
First bit wasn't very useful because I didn't really understand what was going on. But then when I did, it was useful. And
Brilliant.
I actually like it.
Cool.
And Benji's not going to answer because reading.
Don't worry. But I would
was going to
encourage.
say it was a great session today. Thank you.
Oh,
Brilliant.
so you can hear.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't think they could hear you because it's really raining.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you all very much indeed. So my notes for things that we need to cover in future sessions, we're going to do a sort of introduction to Grantium where I will literally show you my screen and there'll be a lot of swearing. We'll do a sort of session on slightly more kind of commercial funding because I think some of you, you know, are kind of crossing that divide where you've got one foot in a slightly more commercial camp and one foot in the subsidised sector. So we'll look at some of that. I've never really done a lot of crowdfunding, but I think that might be something for us to look at, you know, look at examples of where people have used that successfully. My personal view is it can be an awful lot of work, but I think there are ways to make it work for you, and particularly if it's just for a bit of match funding to demonstrate, you know, they were talking about consultation and, you know, sort of proving that the project is wanted or needed. I think if you're applying to a funder for 10 grand and you've managed to raise £1,000 from individual people in a community through a crowdfunder, it's a really powerful message to them. So I think that's something we'll maybe look at in a future session as well. But I think you've all got my email address. If not, I'll shall I put it in the chat? And if you want to sort of set up a one-to-one with me or send me anything to have a look at, then I'm happy to do that. So hang on, I'll just, I can't type and speak at the same time.
Huh? I want to.
Have I done it right? Yes. Cool. Oh, sorry, I've only sent that to Josh. It's not. Sorry, Josh, I'm not stalking you. I'm doing that again.